Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello everyone, my name is Hikmatul Azizah, student of English Education at Universitas Muhammadiyah Bogor Raya. My student number is A321230018. And today, I'm going to present my final project for the academic reading course. In this presentation, I will be discussing an academic article titled Formulating Academic Word List of English Reading Test for Indonesian Undergraduate Student, written by Homsatun Nafia and Gusti Ayu Praminati. Okay, this study was published in March 2025 and focused on how to create suitable academic word lists that match the needs of Indonesian university students, especially in reading tests. Okay, everyone, this presentation aims to summarize the background, literature review, methodology, key findings, and suggestions from the article, and to help us understand the importance of academic vocabulary in improving reading skills for students like us. Okay, let me begin by explaining the background of the research. Indonesian EFL students often pass vocabulary challenges when taking English reading tests such as IELTS. One of the major problems is the lack of specialized academic word lists tailored for this kind of tests. There's a noticeable gap between general vocabulary and the academic vocabulary required for high-stakes reading tests. Therefore, this research highlights the urgent need for a more systematic approach to vocabulary instruction, specifically designed for Indonesian learners. There is also a gap between general vocabulary, which students often learn in school or through daily communication, and the specific academic vocabulary, which is more complex and structured. Therefore, this study emphasizes the urgent need for a systematic approach to vocabulary instruction that focus on developing more relevant, contextualized academic word lists that align with the reading materials commonly found in English proficiency tests. Okay, now let's move on to why academic vocabulary really matters in the context of EFL learning. Academic vocabulary is essential for reading comprehension, especially when it comes to academic texts used in standardized English tests like IELTS or TOEFL. Without a solid understanding of academic words, students may struggle to grasp the main ideas and key arguments presented in reading passage. Research shows that students with a wider vocabulary range, particularly academic vocabulary, tend to score higher on English reading tests. This is because academic words often carry the core meaning of the text, and recognizing them allows learners to read more efficiently and effectively. Moreover, learning specialized vocabulary that is relevant to academic settings is proven to be more beneficial than simply expanding general vocabulary. This is because general vocabulary doesn't always transfer well into academic or formal contexts. By using academic word lists, students and teachers can identify specific vocabulary needs based on the field of study or the nature of the reading materials. This helps in designing more targeted instruction and improving overall reading skills in a much more strategic way. Okay, everyone. Next, research gaps. Now, let's take a look at the research gaps that this study aims to address. The first gap identified is that there are very few studies which attempt to formulate specialized academic word lists using actual IELTS reading materials. Most existing word lists are developed from general academic tests and do not reflect the vocabulary used in standardized tests taken by Indonesian learners. And the second gap is the limited research that examines how effective these academic word lists are for Indonesian EFL students. In other words, even when word lists exist, we don't have enough data on how well they work in helping students prepare for English reading tests. This leads to the practical need for this research. Many Indonesian students are required to take English proficiency tests for scholarships, exchange programs, or university admission, both locally and internationally. However, they often lack access to vocabulary research that are specifically designed for this purpose. Therefore, this study is not just theoretical, it aims to fill those gaps by providing a relevant academic word list based on real IELTS materials, which can then be used by teachers, curriculum designers, and learners to improve vocabulary instruction in a more targeted and practical way. Now, let's move on to one of the most essential parts of this study, the research question, literature review, and discipline-specific word list. Let's begin with the main research question that get this study. This research aims to answer two key questions. The first question, how is the academic word list for English reading test formulated? Okay, this question focuses on the process of developing an academic word list that can be used in English reading tests, whether it is based on data, needs analysis, or frequency in academic tests. And the second question is how significant is the impact of the formulated academic word list for Indonesian EFL undergraduate students? This question tries to measure how impactful the formulated word list is in helping Indonesian EFL students, particularly undergraduates, perform better in academic reading. To address this question, the study sets the following research objective. The first, to develop ALERT, which stands for Academic Word List for English Reading Tests. The second, to evaluate its effectiveness using GRAP's vocabulary teaching principles, a widely recognized framework in vocabulary acquisition. So the goal is not just to create a list, but to ensure it is meaningful and beneficial in the learning process of Indonesian EFL students. And now, let's take a look at the literature review or theoretical foundation behind this research. Several influential word lists have shaped the development of academic vocabulary over the years. The first is the General Service List or GSL by WUS, published in 1953. It includes the most frequent and useful words for general English learners. It forms the basic layer of vocabulary knowledge. And the second is the Academic Word List or AWL by Coxhead in 2000, which was specifically designed to help students understand academic texts across various disciplines. It's been widely adopted in academic English teaching globally. Then comes the new academic word list by Gardner and Davis 2014, which is based on COCA, the Corpus of Contemporary American English. This list is more recent and aims to reflect the modern academic vocabulary usage uh, more accurately. These lists are important milestones in the field of academic vocabulary research. They show the continuous development and refinement of word lists to serve academic learning purpose more effectively. In addition to general academic word lists, this study also considers discipline-specific word lists. Why? Because different academic fields use different terminologies and language style. Here are some examples. The first is medical fields. Word lists have been developed by researchers like Wong et al. 2008 and Lei and Liu 2016 to meet the needs of students in medicine and health science. And the second is engineering field, where 2009 created a basic academic word list for engineering students to help them navigate technical academic texts. And other fields, for chemistry, we have the work of Poliburi and Nasaji, 2013, and for nursing young 2015, and for environmental science Liu and Han 2015 developed useful specialized vocabulary lists. These specialized word lists play a crucial role in ensuring students have access to the vocabulary that is most relevant and practical for their specific field or study. So, by combining strong research questions, a solid literature base, and insight from various academic disciplines, this study aims to develop a well-targeted, effective academic word list that can truly support Indonesian EFL learners, not just in theory, but in real academic setting. Okay, next, English test vocabulary. Let's start with English test vocabulary. When it comes to high-stakes English proficiency tests such as TOEFL, TOEIC, and IELTS, vocabulary plays a critical role in determining student performance. In the TOEFL context, Stanford, Yilmaz, and Zwier 2005 compiled 400 essential words that appear frequently in the test. And for TOEIC, Bauer and Rusan Griffiths, 20, 2016 developed specialized word lists aimed at Japanese students preparing for this specific test. And in IELTS, recent findings by Warren by 2024 emphasize that there is a strong correlation between academic vocabulary mastery and success in the reading section. In fact, vocabulary is considered a single most determining factor in test performance. So, from the studies, we can see that vocabulary is not just a part of the test. It is central to how well students success in it. And in IELTS, recent findings by Warren by 2024 emphasized that there is a strong correlation between academic vocabulary mastery and success in the reading section. In fact, vocabulary is considered a single most determining factor in test performance. So, from these studies, we can see that vocabulary it is not just a part of the test. It is central to how well students succeed in it. And now, let's move to the theoretical framework by Graves 2016, which outlines four principles for effective vocabulary instruction. The first, frequent, varied, and extensive language experience. Learners need to be exposed to the new word in different contexts repeatedly and meaningfully. The second, teaching individual words explicitly. Some words must be taught directly, especially those that are essential in academic texts. And the third, teaching word learning strategies, such as using context clue, word parts, or dictionaries to help learners become more independent. And next, fostering word consciousness, encouraging students to be curious about words, to notice them and to engage with them actively. Next, we'll focus on the Indonesian educational context, which helps explain the urgency and relevance of this study. First, the Merdeka Belajar program encourage student exchange and international exposure, and for that, English proficiency is a must. And the second, university requirements now often include IELTS scores for scholarship or enrollment in international programs. However, students still face major challenges, especially in vocabulary. Many have limited exposure to academic words, and current English classes often don't provide enough specialized material. And this creates a teaching gap where learners are expected to understand academic English but lack the tools, particularly vocabulary research, to do so. And that's exactly where this research comes in to help bridge bridge the gap by developing tailored academic word lists for Indonesian EFL students. Now, let me walk you through the methodology and the step-by-step process we use to develop the OULERT, the academic word list for English reading tests. This study used a mixed methods approach. This study used a mixed method approach, combining both qualitative and quantitative components. The qualitative component includes classroom observation, field notes, and responses from the student to gain insight into their vocabulary learning experience. And the quantitative component focuses on statistical analysis of test scores to evaluate the effectiveness of the word list developed. This mixed approach is chosen because it allows for comprehensive data collection, making the findings more reliable and meaningful, as suggested by Creswell 2013. The research is divided into two major paths. The first is the formulation of the OULERT word list, and the second, testing its effectiveness with EFL learners. The step 1, data collection. The first step in formulating alert is data collection. We collected reading text from IELTS Cambridge practice test books published between 1996 and 2015. In total, we analyzed 10 test books containing 32,819 word tokens. These texts were converted from PDF to TXT format using unfile converter 2.02 and then analyzed using N-word profiler 2.1.0. A tool used for analyze word frequency. This step is important because it provides the raw data from real academic test materials, which ensure the list is practical and relevant to real test situation. Okay, next, word list formulation process. Step 2. Word selection criteria. In step 2, we applied specific criteria to select which words should be included in alert. Here's how it was done. First, we compared all the word tokens and identified words that were outside the existing GSL and AWL list. And then we selected the 500 highest frequency words that appeared consistently across the IELTS reading text, and thus 500 words were then divided evenly. 250 words from GSL1 and 250 words from GSL2. Finally, we filter out function words such as pronouns, preposition, conjunction, and interjection, since these are not the focus of academic vocabulary learning. The selection process ensures that the resulting word list is both statistically significant and educational useful. And next, alert completion tools. Step 3. Word list finalization. In the final step, we use several tools to refine and complete the alert word list. The first is Familiarizer and Flammatizer. These tools were used to classify word families so that learners can study not just individual words, but also their related forms. And the second, Cambridge Dictionary provided precise definition and word list information like noun, verb, adjective, and age. And the next, sketch engine or scale help us find synonyms and collocation, allowing us to understand how the words are used in real academic contexts. And next, participants, implementation, and questionnaire. This article involved 30 undergraduate students. All participants were either in their second or third year and had at least 2 years of experience studying English literature. To ensure a fair comparison, participants were required to have an IELTS score of level 5, which means their proficiency levels were homogeneous. Participants was also voluntary, which reflects ethical research practice. The participants were divided into two groups. The first, control group, 15 students receiving regular IELTS reading instruction, And the second experimental group, uh, 15 students receiving instruction based on alert and grasp vocabulary teaching principles. Okay, and next, teaching implementation. The teaching procedure took place over 15 meetings with each session lasting 100 minutes. The teaching period ran from September 2023 to January 2024. Here's how it was structured. The control group received traditional IELTS reading lesson using existing material, and the experimental groups was taught using the newly developed alert word list supported by GRAP's vocabulary principles, including explicit word teaching and word learning strategies. And for data collection, several tools were used, pre-test and post-test, to measure vocabulary gains, and classroom observation to monitor engagement and implementation, and questionnaires and interviewed to gather student feedback and perception. And next, questionnaire design. To support the quantitative data, a questionnaire was also used. The questionnaire consisted of uh, 11 items and was carefully designed based on GRAP's 2016 vocabulary indicators. The scale used was a 4-point Likert scale. The first is 1, strongly disagree, and the second 4, strongly agree. The questionnaire was tested for the first validity using person correlation, and all items had a correlation coefficient 0.361, which is acceptable. And the second, reliability using Crumbach alpha with a result of 0.834, indicating high internal consistency. For statistical analysis, an independent t-test was applied to determine if there were any significant differences between the control and experimental groups. The significance level was set at P is less than 0.05, meaning results were considered statistically significant if they met that threshold. And the findings, with the participant and research tools in place and the teaching process complete, the next section present the research findings, particularly the composition and result of the alert word list. Continue. Okay, everyone. This section explains the alert composition, test score analysis, and student feedback. The alert word list was developed from a total of 10 IELTS reading test files. On average, each file contained about 3,500 word types and 18,000 word tokens. The highest volume of word types was found in IELTS 5 with 4,145 word types, and the most word tokens appeared in IELTS 3 with 21,964 tokens. As per GSL coverage, we found 75.41% from GSL1, 6.77% from GSL2, and 17.82% of the words were outside the GSL, which indicates the need for new, updated academic vocabulary research. And let's now look at the test score improvements between the control group and the experimental group. The control group The first pre-test average 22.13 and the second post-test average 23.53 and the third is improvement 1.4 points and the next standard deviation 3.29 or pre-test 5.01 for test and t-test result 0.022 which means P is less than 0.005, indicating that the improvement was statistically significant. An experimental group pre-test average 22.2 and post-test average 25.93, improvement 3.73 points, standard deviation 3.84 for pre-test, 5.19 post-test. T-test result 0.000032. Again, P is less than 0.05, indicating a highly significant improvement. And when we compare the two groups, we can see that the control group improved by 1.4 points, while the experimental group improved by 3.73 points. Between group, t-test produced a result of 0.015, which means P is less than 0.05. This indicates that the difference between the two groups is statistically significant. In conclusion, the experimental group, which used the Euler AWL IRT, Euler, Wordlist, and applied Grab's teaching principle show greater and more significant improvement than the group that received traditional instruction. The key findings here is that Euler combined with Grab's instructional principle is more effective than standard IELTS reading instruction alone. We also collected feedback from students, and here are some highlights from the questionnaire result. The highest read statement was learning vocabulary is important. It received a perfect score of 4.0 out of 4.0, meaning all students strongly agree with that statement. They support the idea that students recognize the value of focus, vocabulary instruction, and confirms the positive perception of the Euler-based teaching approach. So, overall, both the statistical result and student feedback strongly support the use of AWLERT for improving vocabulary learning and reading performance in IELTS context. And next, questionnaire results, student feedback. The student responses to the questionnaire were very positive and insightful. The highest read statement was learning vocabulary is important. The statement received a perfect score of 4.0 out of 4.0, showing that every student strongly agree with its importance. And for teaching methods, student gave a score of 3.6 out of 4.0 for the statement, encouraging reading activities, indicating that they found the lessons motivating and beneficial. Students also support the continuation of the program with a score of 3.67 out of 4.0, suggesting that they would like to see this method used in future classes. Finally, students demonstrate interest for consciousness, meaning they become more aware of how vocabulary impacts their learning. To expand on this research, several recommendations for future studies can be made. First, the scope should be burdened by involving students from other majors beyond English literature and including participants from various EFL countries. Second, increasing the sample size to more than 30 participants will improve the generalizability of the findings. The third, it is recommended to apply the same methodology to other English proficiency exams such as TOEFL. Lastly, future studies could integrate this approach into other language skills, including listening, speaking, and writing, not just reading. And recommendation for methodological improvements, future research is encouraged to use longitudinal studies to examine whether vocabulary knowledge is retained over time. In addition, comparing the AWLERT AWLERT approach with other vocabulary teaching methods will help determine which methods is most effective in enhancing long-term vocabulary acquisition. Finally, here are several recommendations for educational institutions. Schools and universities are encouraged to integrate AWLERT into the official English curriculum as a core component of vocabulary instruction. It is also important to provide teacher training and workshop on how to implement corpus-based vocabulary teaching effectively. Furthermore, institution should consider shifting from traditional vocabulary teaching methods to evidence-based approach like AWLERT or AWLERT to enhance learning outcomes. The highest volume of word types was found in IELTS 5 with 4,145 word types, and the most word tokens appeared in IELTS 3 with 21,964 tokens. Okay. This study made several meaningful contributions. The first, it introduced AWLERT, the first specialized academic word list designed specifically for IELTS, a reading test from an Indonesian EFL context. The second, it provides empirical evidence toward statistically significant results, demonstrating that vocabulary instruction using AWLERT improves student performance. Third, the study over a practical framework that can be replicated for developing other word lists in various educational contexts. And lastly, it promotes teaching innovation by integrating corpus linguistic into vocabulary instruction, presenting a modern and effective approach to EFL teaching. Looking forward, we suggest several important steps. First, AWLERT should be continuously updated based on new IELTS material to maintain its relevance and accuracy. The second, similar word lists can be developed for other English proficiency exams such as TOEFL or PTA. The third, creating multimedia learning research, including apps, videos, and interactive platforms, can make vocabulary acquisition more engaging and accessible. Ultimately, this study provides target vocabulary research that can significantly support Indonesian EFL students in improving their performance on international English tests and achieving their academic goals. Okay, thank you for your attention. I'm Hikmatul Azizah. Hopefully, this research not only contributes to academic knowledge but also provides practical tools and inspiration for improving English language education in Indonesia. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.